Jim Jones, how's it going with you, sir?
Hey there, Charles. How are you, my friend?
Oh, listen, I'm good now. I have the infamous Jim Jones on the phone right now, or I guess in virtual reality or wherever space we're in. Um, hey, you ready? How you been?
I've been fine. How have you been?
Uh, you know, look, every day above ground in the era of COVID is a good day. That's my tagline. I'm gonna keep it, and so I'm glad that we're having this conversation because that means we're both doing well.
I may have to steal your tagline and put it on a T-shirt, though. I rather
Listen,
like it.
not at that at all. So let's jump in. So,
Okay.
Jim, I've never asked you this question in all the times we've been together, but how
Uh-oh.
does a English graduate from Harvard who, decides to go to Juilliard and get a Fulbright fellowship, you're hanging out in France, and then all of a sudden, what did you get an epiphany and say, I'm going back to the States? I'm going to go get my MBA. Hey, New York, Columbia, here I come. And then, by the way, I'm going to just become a powerhouse within the mentoring, team building, executive coaching arena. How does all of that sort of come together?
Oh, I'm not sure it all has come together. I can tell you what kicked the initial bucket, if you will. I was an opera singer, as you probably know, and when I was over in Europe and thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up, where to take my career and all of that, it made sense to me. And incidentally, had I it to redo again, and we don't have that opportunity, I wouldn't have made the decisions that I made. Though I'm grateful for everything that's flowed from it. I thought it made sense for me to get a plan B, and that's not probably it wouldn't be how I would mentor a young artist. I would say go for it. If you starve, but live that passion to its absolute ultimate, if you will. Anyway, I thought the plan B would be to get an MBA. Anything you may know about me, Charles, should suggest that there's very little about me that aligns with an MBA, but that's another podcast, as it were. But in any event, I got back and Columbia accepted me, and okay. But they did tell me initially, they said, Mr. Jones, you did fine on your GMATs, but we need to tell you you're not quite up there in terms of sort of the analytical piece. Would you mind, said they, would you consider delaying coming to Columbia for half a year and taking a course in calculus? And I, in my supreme arrogance, said no. I literally did, and I thought, okay, that's done, whatever it is. But somehow they accepted me anyway, and I went, and I'll never forget the sort of turning point. Take the road to the left, or road to the right was when I took managerial accounting, and that in Columbia and probably at a few other schools also is sort of where the rubber meets the road in terms of who's gonna get that MBA and who is not. I turned in an empty blue book. You're probably too young to know from the era of blue books. I turned in an empty final exam, empty, at Columbia University, arguably one of the top 10 schools in the world for an MBA program. Empty. This man looks at me and said, Mr. Jones, there's nothing here but your name. And I said, you know what? And with any luck, it's spelled correctly, because that's literally all I got out of your class. It was a death wish. It was a death wish. I went out, went home, had coffee, and went running, and that was it. Somehow, they decided to keep me anyway. It must have been my scintillating personality. In any event, they said, no, 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 we think you bring something different to the mix of MBA students. So they kept me. Eventually, I did pass managerial accounting, but it may have been the universe saying to me, James Jones, are you clear that this is real alignment with who you are at that sort of core level? In any event, longer story than perhaps you asked for. When I graduated, I thought that I was going to take that degree, put it in my back pocket, and go back on the operatic stage. I literally thought that. I was that naive. Well, Citibank insisted that I begin paying back my student loans a little sort of ASAP, you know what I mean? So I had to get a job real quick. And if there was anything that sort of made sense to me in terms of what I knew about myself at that particular juncture, was something in HR space and all of that. So I began my career as a generalist, and from there, sort of the training and development, and sort of that was sort of my avenue towards what I do now, which is coaching and consulting in the DE&I space.
So basically, we could attribute the fact that you were awful in math in the beginning as a gift to us, because now you're just, the trainer to the executive elite. I mean,
yeah. If that's what you want to attribute that, go right ahead.
And I'm going to say it for them. Thank you.
That's right.
So question,
Sure.
what made you decide to go to nonprofits and then focus on that diverse leadership set?
The work we do around DE&I and executive development really doesn't align itself with profit versus nonprofit. Leadership is leadership, and the way in which it plays out in any of these environments at the core is going to be the same. Now you can say the stakes are different when you're driving in by, being driven by a mission versus a P&L statement, but no, not really. Leadership is of leadership, and I think that there really wasn't sort of a hard decision to go nonprofit. In fact, I began my career in the profit space, if you will, profit making space, and happily ended up in nonprofits, which certainly bought into this notion of leadership and the things that can be trained and coached in.
I got it. Now, in today's world, we're seeing, a large influx of programs that are geared towards diversity, right? Some would say leveling the playing field. Some would, I've talked to God on so many people, some say about time. You hear the full spectrum of.
Sure.
When I say that word diverse leadership and diversity, what does that mean to you? I read an article that you were part of a while back, and I know you had some opinions on diversity, etc.
Oh, I don't know if they're opinions so much. I'm just as naive as the next guy about what really works and what really doesn't really move the needle. This whole notion of leveling the playing field, phrases like that frighten me a little bit, only because they become rather stagnant and they become rather sort of, if I can level the playing field or some other bromide I can drag out, I've done my work here is done. It's very complex, particularly in our culture, the Western culture, and particularly in American culture with our history of slavery. Very, very complex issues around race and gender and some other isms too. I'm not instructing you. It's just really a focus. It's about constantly asking myself James Jones questions about, James Jones, where are you coming from when you do this work? What's the authenticity that you bring to it in terms of a voice, in terms of self-reflection, that you can have a conversation with Charles, which is open, which is transformational on both sides, and which there is at least a likelihood that you're going to grow from it as he. That's it. Now, there are structures and tools and all kinds of things that we do use, and I think many of them are very, very powerful. But at the end of the day, is how do I encourage myself, A, to go to those sort of uncomfortable places? How do I then develop a vocabulary to connect with you so that you have an opportunity, if should you choose, to go to those uncomfortable and difficult places also? And out of that, how do we sort of co-create something that suggests that we've both grown, that we've both had a little bit of enlightenment in the process, and can then take that enlightenment back into the relationships, the teams, the organizations that we have some responsibilities to. Got it.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation the word passion, and I had the privilege in sitting in on one of your training courses, and you brought that passion, and it was a comfortable, unconventional teaching style, which for me,
unconventional, he says.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, some of the first words that were said, I was like, oh, we're having a conversation today. We're, because sometimes you get into these rooms and you're hearing these things, and everybody's, politically correct as they can be, and I get it. You have to worry about so many different things as you're passing on information and making sure that we don't ruffle feathers, but you were still able to bring a level of passion along with a level of visibility, clarity to the information that was being shared. How have you honed those skills over years? Because it's not easy.
No, it's not easy for any of us, and we all come from very, very different places as we try to do the work and to show up authentically, really, which is the bottom line. My own passion, as it were, which is no better certainly than anybody else's passion, or no more inflamed or inspired than theirs. I bring my musical background, I guess the theater and the stage, and some of that plays into it. Obviously, some of it is, I have to do the Jimmy Jones show for a moment, and but making sure that that's in service of some truth as opposed to the other way around. I remember earlier in my career when I was sort of learning how to be a process facilitator, this incredible woman who was sort of teaching these skills and really modeling it herself said, if you come out of a session and they've said to you, my God, Jim Jones, that was wonderful, you were just on fire, you've probably not done your work. The idea is to have them be on fire. It's not about me. Having said which, I'm going to show up and use everything that I can from an authentic place again to help you ignite, as it were.
I'm going to say a word. Winteries. What does that mean to you?
Well, I'll give you the German pronunciation of it, Winterreise.
Oh God, I was never going to get that.
Is the name of my company. So when I was thinking of becoming very sort of, give myself some business structure, I was looking around for a name that resonated for me in terms of my LLC. And I went through everything, J.C. Jones Associates, but everything I could come up with, you just know somebody in the world had already taken it. And one day, quite literally, as I sat listening to some music of Hans Schubert, I was thinking back on my performing days, and one of the earlier song cycles that I had performed of Schubert was called the Winterreise. And I thought, that's it. I bet nobody has a Winterreise consulting group. And darn it, it landed. And here I am today, Winterreise Consulting.
If people want to reach out to you to get a better understanding of what services you provide, fact checked, etc., how do they contact you for that? Because I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of organizations who could benefit from your tutelage.
Thank you. Flatter me. Obviously, we can go to LinkedIn and find James Jones there in all of his blazing glory. jcjones@winterreise.com will reach me. And quite frankly, my own email, jamescjones34@gmail.com will reach me also. My website is just about to launch, so I won't direct you there quite yet until that's in fully prepared. But there are any number of ways to reach out to me and to have that conversation, and I welcome all of that.
Got it. And before I get to my last question, I wanted to go back to NAMIC for a second.
Surely.
You were a large part of NAMIC, National Association for Multi-Ethnicity and Communication, for a long period of time. And I've been on calls and on the phone with various leaders who, when you bring up LDP, et cetera, and I say your name, they're like, oh, he was my teacher, or he's my instructor, or I know, And so there's a large group of individuals who are now working in corporate America in senior roles who had to pass through you. And every time they say your name or I say it and they acknowledge it, it's always with that passion. They're like, oh yeah, and so you just needed to hear that and know that.
Thank you for that.
Because that literally, I was on the phone, I'm not gonna say names, but I was on the phone a couple of days ago, and the person I was talking to was, they were on fire. And like, yeah, and then, oh yes, and James, and yes. I said, oh, okay, yeah. I didn't want to say, well, I'm going to be talking with him in a couple of days. But, and so yes, that's now being this, steward of the English language from Harvard and all. I see this wonderful library behind you. That has to make me ask, what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I've been reading Proust, Marcel Proust, if you can believe that, just because I've gotten, he's probably arguably the greatest writer in the West in the 20th century, certainly. And I just got to a place where, you sort of hit a wall. I wasn't being inspired by anything. And I went back to my roots. And Proust certainly is, if anything has formed me ideologically and in terms of literature, it would be Proust. So I've been sort of rereading Remembrances of Things Past of Proust. How's that for an answer?
What genre is he in? I mean, what's his writing style? What brings you to him?
Proust came from the, oh my God, I don't want to give a literary lecture, but the early 20th century French tradition, probably, again, arguably the greatest of French writers, certainly in the last 100 years or so. His is about talking about, he comes from almost a psychology background, talking about the human condition, how humans interact, what drives their passions, what ignites their passions, what keeps them blocked, and all of that. And he talks about that clearly from a particularly literary point of view. And he's a storyteller. His father had been very much involved in the psychological space, and he came from that tradition. He himself, throughout his life, had spent the last 20 years of it really creating this 6-tome book called The Remembrances of Things Past, in French, À la recherche de temps perdu. And it's just informed almost every literary giant since his time. He was not a giant in his time. He had to be dead before his was recognized as probably the greatest contribution to French literature, if not Western literature, in the last, again, century or so. I can't believe I went through that for you.
No, I mean, when you say, I could look real ignorant and say,
you're not ignorant in the least.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I could ask the question because I had no clue who he was, right?
That's quite all right. I fully prepared to sing a couple of Negro spirituals, you see, but we can talk about Proust if you'd rather. Don't tell me I don't have
session. It would not be a session. So One last question when I get out of here. When last we talked, you asked me, what's keeping me up at night? So let me turn that around to you and ask you, what keeps you up at night right about now?
Well, before we do that, did you answer me?
No, I did not.
I don't. You can say that.
Oh, I did. I take it back. I said it was my daughter's,
You
my
did.
7-year-old with driving. So I take that back.
I don't know what keeps me up at night tonight.
I mean, we got a laundry list of things that could.
Yeah, exactly. You got time? You want to get your beer
Yeah.
while we go through this? I'm just waking up each day and being grateful for the night before and praying like hell that I'm going to make it through the next one, with any sense of grace. At a point in life, wanting to stay, again, I want to stay authentic. I want to stay relevant. I want to stay as truthful to myself as I can. And that's not always as clear on sometimes it's on some days as it is on others. And so that takes work. And sometimes that work doesn't end when I put my head on my pillow. It's going on and those wheels are turning and the angst and the questions are there. And that can keep me up nights. But again, I'm really blessed that I wake up in the morning, whether I've had an hour's sleep or 8 hours sleep, with a renewed sense of, you got this, Jim, with a little help from friends, obviously.
And you certainly do have it. Like I said earlier, we are probably happy to the calculus and math department over at Columbia University because
Yes,
it's enabled us to have one of the best team building, executive coaching trainers out there. And so honored to have sat through some of your courses and to call you a friend and a mentor. So on behalf of Coffee Talk, we thank you. And I salute.
Thank you. I salute you back. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, be good out there.
You too.